All right. Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Karen Houghton. I'm the CEO of Infinite Giving, and I'm so glad so many of you are joining us for a conversation that may just shift how you think about generosity and fundraising, especially as we get into end of year giving. So, our topic today is the generosity shift, how to inspire and secure non-cash gifts this giving season. And what I love about today is that it's not just a tactic. Today, it is more about a mindset and how we actually talk about these things and make the ask. Generous people want to give from their assets, not just their bank accounts. But here's the problem. Most nonprofits are not prepared to receive those gifts, or even if they have the infrastructure, they're not always sure how to ask for them. So a lot of you guys may be in that boat where even you can receive them, but maybe that doesn't mean that they're coming in. And that can be a really frustrating tension for so many nonprofit leaders and how you feel. You're expected to build that capacity before you have certainty. Or maybe you take that leap of faith and the stock gifts don't roll in and you start to wonder, well, what am I doing wrong? Is this worth the effort? Do donors really give this way? And the answer is yes, they do. We process these types of gifts all the time for our clients, but you have to be ready. And not just technically, but relationally. And today we're going to unpack not just what non-cash giving is, but how to invite it in. How do we talk to generous givers in a way that feels aligned and not awkward? How do we reframe that ask in a way that matches their intent and ultimately fuels your mission? So, today, to help guide this conversation, I'm joined by someone I really respect and admire, Joanna Hogan, who is the founder and CEO of Inspire Generosity. Joanna helps nonprofit leaders move beyond traditional fundraising by teaching this whole new approach, one that centers on trust, authentic connection, and giving experiences that feel joyful and deeply meaningful. Which doesn't that sound like a beautiful thing? So, as we approach this end of year giving, all these types of tax efficiencies and pathways for non cash giving are often something that many donors are looking for. And Joanna is going to help us figure out how to ask for them. So, Joanna, thank you so much for being here with me today. Do you want to give everyone like a brief overview of your background and kind of the work that you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the webinar. I have been in the fundraising profession for about 30 years, and I've had pretty much every hot seat you can have. And I have just had the honor of being able to invite people to invest in the causes they care about. I've worked for small nonprofits where I was the only person there. It was a one-person shop. I've worked in medium-sized organizations, and then I worked for Michigan State University for the College of Human Medicine. And that was a $90 million capital campaign. So I have experience in a variety of settings. I've coached many fundraising professionals, and there's nothing I'd rather do. So now I teach nonprofit leaders how to inspire generosity so they don't have to rely on the traditional fundraising methods that really don't work so well anymore.
Wonderful. Well, we're so glad to have you. And I know we're going to get into this content and the reason we're all here today. As a quick reminder before we dig in, we can answer questions live. So as you guys have questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box or drop it in the chat. And we have a moderator on the Infinite Giving side keeping an eye out on those. So if we can jump into them mid-conversation, we will. Otherwise, we'll try to hold some of them for the end of our time together as well. So make sure you submit those questions. And if for some reason we don't get to it, we'll make sure we follow up via email. All right, Joanna, before we get into frameworks and strategies, I want to begin with your heart because when I first met you, we kind of dove right into some really deep conversations. And I was like, this woman is somebody I want to know. As you've said, you've worked with so many nonprofits and generous individuals. And one of the things you taught me pretty immediately is, hey, let's not talk about calling it fundraising. Let's talk about it inspiring generosity. So, can you tell us what the distinction means to you personally and kind of why this work matters so much?
Fundraising has kind of a bad reputation. And I think that's because the focus is often on money. How do we get money from people so that we can do great work? And when fundraising is about getting money, It can be transactional. It's also often one-sided. And so you have this dynamic where we have a need and we're looking for someone to help us, and that can just get really awkward and uncomfortable. So, yeah, fundraising is more about money, whereas when we inspire true generosity, we're helping people use their financial resources to make a difference in the world in a way that brings them great joy and blesses your mission.
I love that because money is uncomfortable to talk about, right? Even when we are fundraisers or we're inspiring generosity, like money is the fuel to the mission. And so it's something we have to engage in. And sometimes, like if you're a development officer on this webinar, you're like, yes, we get that. We talk about it all the time. But sometimes you have board members and other kind of key stakeholders who are also out in the community talking about the mission. And it gets uncomfortable pretty quick because they want to share about the program and the impact, but making that bridge from that to the money conversation and the actual ask is where people often get uncomfortable. So building from that, looking at like this practical and strategic perspective, what's the real difference between traditional fundraising and inspiring generosity? And what is that shift change when we engage with high capacity donors versus our general donors? And I know you don't like the name donors either. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I prefer calling people giving partners or supporters or contributors. That's just a personal preference. I know everyone's used to saying donors, but when I think of a donor, I think of giving blood. I think of giving, it's not a particularly inspiring word. But essentially it's not even so much about the words we use. It's about the energy we bring to these conversations. It's about caring as much about the person who's giving, about their experience and what do they want to accomplish with their money that's meaningful to them. That you care just as much about that as you do about what you need, or what I shouldn't even say need, what you want. Because the reality is we usually have what we need. We just want to do something. We want to solve a problem. We want to fund a dream. We want to find a cure. Whatever it is we want to do, when you're inspiring generosity, you're looking for funding partners, people who have, they have the wealth, you have the time and expertise, and they want to partner with you to accomplish something great. That has a lot to do with language, and it also has to do with your own mindset going into these conversations.
I love it. Freeman Haba just wrote in and said he loved the difference between fundraising and inspiring slash creating joy through intentionally planned generosity as a way of life, which is so good. That's exactly what you're saying is, hey, it's all these little things like language, but
Mhm.
it's also this different, it's like inviting into, and it's a opportunity. Does it look different when you're talking to different donors on how you do this? Or as we kind of dive into the framework, is it the same across the board?
I believe the same principles apply regardless of the age, the race, the location, regardless of the mission. It doesn't matter if you're raising money for medical research or for pets or for the environment or a homeless shelter. The bottom line is people, you want to be talking to the right person, and your goal is to make sure that they end up ultimately being invited to make a gift in the right amount at the right time for a right project in the right method in a way that brings them joy. And when you focus on that versus desperately looking for someone to help you, not only is it more effective and efficient, but it's also so much more rewarding personally to do this work.
And that mindset shift is like the very foundation of this whole framework that we're going to get into. But I
Mhm.
think that's where I wanted you to lean into this kind of upfront is that it's, hey, this is inspiring generosity. Instead of thinking about, even if we feel desperate inside, which every nonprofit leader has felt at some point, that like, how are we going to do this? How do we keep this work going? How do we continue to make impact? It's reframing it in this way that it's like, hey, this isn't just fundraising and money, money, money. It's inviting them into this opportunity to be generous with what they've been given and what they've earned.
And that actually requires more than just changing the language and saying, well, we just need to understand it differently. It's not just head knowledge. So much of that sense of desperation comes from some internal stories that we're telling ourselves. Some of it's tied to the money stories we have, how we were, how money was handled in our families. It can get really personal. And sometimes those things are buried really deep and we don't even realize that that's contributing to our anxiety. So it's really important to step back and look at what's going on inside of me personally, um, that's making this so awkward or so nerve-wracking. A lot of times, you can take classes and you can learn techniques, but if you don't deal with those internal anxieties that might go pretty deep, it doesn't typically resolve itself.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And everybody knows it, right? As soon as you talk about it, you just take a moment to like self-reflect. It's like, how comfortable am I really in these conversations? And then just asking yourself why or why not. I know I did a workshop the other day and we talked about having nonprofits like kind of grow into the idea of, how do we talk about these gifts? How do we talk to generous givers, which I learned from you, Joanna, that language. But then also, when we start to get those gifts in, how are we stewarding them? Where do we put them? And some people get uncomfortable in those situations. And I'm always like, that's okay. Sit with it and then kind of think through why are these words uncomfortable? And that helps you kind of peel the onion. It's not a bad thing. Most of us do feel uncomfortable, but just recognizing it and then being able to sort through that helps you kind of get to those next steps.
Can I share one more reason why that can be awkward and uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because we're talking about it too soon. We haven't
Mm,
spent enough time developing the relationship and making sure they're the right person to talk to in the first place. And so if we're just going out and trying to find people and we're not really, we don't know them well enough, that contributes to the awkwardness too.
absolutely. Yes. All right. So I know we're going to get into that a little bit deeper, but first let's talk about why stock and other non-cash gifts matter, right? I think a lot of us are like, great, we're comfortable with credit card donations, right? And those are coming in and all of our traditional fundraising, but sometimes these non-cash gifts are something a little bit new or something we're less familiar with. And in that conversation, a lot of nonprofit leaders find themselves stuck in what we call here at Infinite Giving a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, where it's like, hey, well, no one's asking to give this way, so we don't need it. And then you're like, or, well, we have the ability to accept non-cash gifts, but then no one uses it. So our donors just don't want to give that way. And we would challenge and say that both of those mindsets are actually understandable, but they may be holding you back because the data tells a very different story. And I've got 4 data points that I want to share. And then we'll dig into those. So, first, a way to think about wealth of these generous givers. In the US, over 90% of the wealth is held in assets like stocks or real estate. It's not held in a checking account. So if you think about when you're going to these generous givers and 90% of their wealth is held in stocks or securities or other things, but you're asking for a cash gift, they are giving to you from their smallest bucket of money. And that bucket and that size of it makes a smaller gift seem much bigger because you're asking from their 10% versus asking from their 90%. The second stat is that the average online cash gift is around $128, but the average stock gift is $8,000. So think about how many individual gifts it would take to get online cash gifts. I think it's like 60 plus different donors to give you the 128 versus one stock gift. And a lot of that has to do with the tax efficiencies and the accessibility. And that leads us to our third data point. The stock giving has grown over 135% in the last 8 years. So you have these bigger gifts where most of the wealth is being held. We know that stock giving has grown over 135%. And then we're stuck in this chicken and the egg problem. And that's where we always share. Dr. Russell James has done a lot of research out of from Texas Tech. And he did a study that showed that nonprofits who pursue and ask for stock gifts in addition to cash gifts raise 55% more over a 5-year period. So if you're sitting there and being like, well, my donors don't want to give this way, nobody really asked, or we've got it, but it's like one or two, that's kind of that chicken and egg scenario where we're like, well, the data tells us that they're large gifts, the majority of their wealth is held there. Stock giving's grown 135% over the last several years, and that nonprofits who ask for these gifts raise 55% more. So this is a huge opportunity that we don't want anyone to miss. So, Joanna, when you hear stats like that, where do you think that disconnect comes from between nonprofit leaders and their donors? And what do you think some of those common misconceptions are?
It just take when I hear those, I just think about how many times I was told that when I was a fundraising professional.
Yep.
Whether I was a development director, if I was doing a campaign, I was always told that. And I knew it, but it didn't translate for me. And I think back about why. Like I was told, and I would be like, okay, I know donor advised funds are a big deal. I need to start talking about those. And I kept thinking I need to figure out what those words are. And what does that mean again? I forgot because I don't typically deal with that on a regular basis. And it felt like jargon. It felt a little foreign. And because I wasn't personally experienced, it was like something I have to remember to say. And I'm often asked, what's the right way to say this or how do I invite this? And I would say that um, now I look back and I'm like, well, gosh, now that I've personally opened a donor advised fund and I've used one, I talk about them all the time because it's natural. It's normal now for me because I've experienced it. I think a lot of people in these roles are not in the same category at all as some of the contributors. And so there's sometimes self-doubt, like imposter syndrome, like who am I to ask for a gift like that? Or I don't want to put someone in a tough spot financially. Sometimes we have over responsibility, right? Um, there may be a variety of reasons that have nothing to do with not knowing it's the right thing to do. So again, a lot of times it's our own emotional uncomfortableness. But let's just say you're good with that. And you're like, no, I know that. Then I would say keep in mind that we're always trying to offer a great giving experience. And as you said, this is so much better for them. It's not only better for you and your organization, but for them, there's tax advantages. It's easier for them. It's lighter for them. Sometimes I think when they have gains or they have assets that they want to give, it is easier. Sometimes it feels like they didn't necessarily earn it, or it was a windfall, or it's information, or it's assets they can painlessly give. They don't really feel it in their day to day. So when you put yourself in their shoes and you think, well, what can I do that would benefit them? It's like, well, offer them that opportunity. And back to the words, if you don't remember all the different types, you can simply say, a lot of people like to give through stocks and bonds, or people like to give through non-cash gifts. Have you ever considered that? Would you like to learn more? And you can partner with someone if you don't feel comfortable from that point forward. I'd encourage you to get comfortable. But again, it's a variety of reasons. Rarely is it so much about the words, more of it's about the emotional feelings going on underneath and maybe just a lack of experience.
Mhm. And what it was so in the tax efficiencies, right? They can save up to 37% on capital gains taxes, right? So this is a donor.
Mhm.
So if they have, when we talk about tax efficiency, so if you take say you take $100,000. Well, 37% of that is pretty significant, right? That's $37,000 that they can save in taxes that then could then go to you. And then they also get to claim that full gift value of $100,000. So they're not giving versus if you're like, hey, can't we just ask them to give it as cash or this donor writes me a check all the time? That's great. Like celebrate any generosity that comes in the form. But like Joanna kind of just said, it's like, what's best for the donor? And sometimes the donor isn't even aware of the tax efficiencies. Joanna, did you ever get into that spot where I love how candid you were? Because I feel like we talk to nonprofit leaders all the time who are like, well, yeah, I know I'm supposed to say this, but like how I live it out feels very disconnected to what you're saying this data is.
Mhm.
how did you kind of bridge that gap of education, both for yourself or for donors, or did you just kind of refer out where you're like, actually talk to your tax person, talk to somebody like Infinite Giving or whoever, but how did you bridge that gap personally?
At one point, I remember asking someone who does give that way to help me understand. And
Mm,
I said, how do you do that? Why do you give that way? I love to ask people, what is your favorite method for giving? In addition to what are your top three charities or what are the best giving experiences you've ever had? And I'm always trying to put myself in their shoes. So learning from people who do give that way. And then I've always had a really strong relationship with attorneys and people who are in the plan giving space who have said, Joanna, if you want me to come along with you on an appointment, I'm happy to go and just be there for support and provide some of the technical information. So that helped. And then every time I would bring someone along, I would learn some more. Um, it was gradual, but seriously, when I took a look at donor advised funds and got to a point where I could contribute that way, it was so different because, oh my gosh, this is great. I have an app. I can put all my giving money into this account. I can allocate it and get one receipt at the end. Like, this is super easy. Why did this seem so complicated when people were telling me to talk about it before? There was just something about having done it. It's so much easier to refer when you've done it. Now, not everybody has the capacity to do it, but you can certainly have someone walk you through it and don't be ashamed to say, this is hard for me because I probably will never have a donor advice fund, but can you help? Let's pretend. Let's pretend I do. Let's do some role playing. So that's,
yeah.
I hope that helped. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it is inviting us into a safe place where it's like you don't have to be an expert.
Hmm.
There are experts, right? There are, and it is when it's tax efficiencies, be like, hey, from my understanding, it can be really helpful for you to kind of, benefit in multiple ways from this kind of generosity. You should talk to your tax professional, or I'd love to be able to send you some follow information. I'm going to deep dive it myself and then let you know what I find out. So you don't have to have all the answers, right? But you want to have enough to where those high capacity donors slash generous givers, as Joanna has taught us, are like, okay, these people can handle gifts. They kind of understand me because it's still relational. And I know I'm going to get you to talk us through your framework in just a minute. But I know Becky sent us a question that said, hey, all right, at a major event like a gala, what verbiage and information should we include on the giving card that invites and facilitates non-cash gifts to let them know we're ready to receive them? On the infinite giving side, what we always say is it easy for the donor? Like we have a QR code. So like our donation page can handle stocks, crypto, DAF grants, endowment gifts, credit, debit, Apple Pay, all of that. And we're mobile friendly. So we always say, great, turn it into a QR code, put it on the table, put it on mailers, and then literally from their phone, they should be able to scan it and pledge that gift and make that gift. So that's the tactical side of like, please make it easy. I love it if you have a brokerage account, but then when it's like, download the PDF, have your guy call our guy, then don't forget to tell us that it's coming so we know it's coming. And that's that traditional process. So there are ways for donors where turn your page into a QR code, scan it, they can give that gift, and then hey, yes, it's with a fiduciary. We've got all of this. We'll send you that receipt. That's our process. Joanna, what language though would you put around that for this specific scenario?
Well, first I have to tell you that I have this belief that when we talk to everybody, we talk to nobody. And
Mm.
so, and I also believe that when people give big gifts and they're making large gifts, it's because they love you. They've liked you for a while, and then they have fallen in love with you if they're going to part with large gifts. So this is again, it ties back to that relationship. I don't know too many people who've maybe come to an event and they hardly know you at all, and they're like, I think I'm going to make a huge gift and I'm going to use stock, or I'm going to put them in my estate because I see they accept it. The reality is that events are wonderful for friend raising. They're wonderful for exposing people, and some organizations do a great job of generating revenue, but they're the most expensive way to raise a dollar, and they're the least effective way to talk about, transformational gifts. Those happen more often than not in private places, one-on-one or with couples. Um, so I'm less concerned about how we say those kinds of things and more concerned about our strategy. If you really want to secure non-cash gifts and you want to have people making gifts that are going to require more thought and more care, those are conversations I would rather see made in person. Um, so not that you don't want to make people aware that you do accept them, that's great. But again, it's much more effective. I believe in less but better,
Mhm.
fewer but deeper relationships.
Mhm.
There's my take on that.
I love that because we do it. Oh, gosh, as being a nonprofit leader, you have to do all the things, right? You have to go really wide and then you have to go really deep and you have to have these one-on-one conversations, but then you have to do events. I know I was talking to a nonprofit leader the other day and they were like, we're really event heavy. It's just what we do, right? And they're trying to figure out what works or what not, what doesn't work. And I think on our end, I love that. You're right. It's relationship building. You sometimes you'll get an unexpected gift and we process those for people sometimes, but typically they do come from relationships. And that's where understanding tax efficiencies are doing that. I think kind of our premise would be at Infinite Giving is like, how often are you letting them know that they can give to you in different ways? So
Right,
when
right.
we talk about the gala, right, it's is some stranger going to make a stock gift? Maybe, right? Cross our finger, but like it's less likely. But at the same time, talking about it, I've been at so many galas and they're like, yes, and they're giving and they're making the ask and we're sending money and we're texting and it's a beautiful, beautiful, fun thing. Rarely have I ever heard, hey, for those of you who hold securities and are interested in these types of giving, come find us afterwards. There may be a great tax opportunity for you to kind of, enter into this generous giving with us. So whether it's doing a QR code like Infinite Giving is there, or I know like I always use the example when I Instagram scroll late at night, right? Please tell me I'm not the only one that does this, right? But you're in bed and I'm like doing that. A good like marketing rule is that you have to see something 7 times before you'll purchase. And so I often think about repetition and doing it in a way that makes sense, right? And isn't salesy, but it's more like, again, you're inviting them into the opportunity where if you've just mentioned a stock gift once ever and never bring it up again, or is it just a part of your giving culture where you guys, yeah, hey, we're talking about impact and program, and guess what? There are different ways for you to, send your generous giving to us, and here's different ways that you may want to consider. What do you think about that, Joanna? Would you agree with that?
I agree wholeheartedly. Education is really important. That's a huge part of our job is to educate people and to let them know that there are a variety of methods, and our goal is to come up with a method that makes sense for you and your family. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. Education's huge, absolutely. I did kind of chuckle when you said, because we have to do events. I had someone ask me, she's like, you nonprofits have to do events, right? That's like part of their requirement. And I was like, no, they don't have to do events, but it's become what people think we have to do. And like I said, I'm not against events. They have a purpose and they can be very valuable for a lot of reasons. Um, but a lot of the things we think we have to do, we don't have to do. We can let go of some things. And because burnout is real and events are expensive. So again, I may come across as being anti-event. I'm not. But I will say that switching from fundraising to inspiring generosity means you have to give yourself permission to not do some things that we always do just because we feel like we've started this tradition. How could we possibly stop?
Mm, yeah.
We can. We are free to change things up, but it's hard, I know.
All right, Joanna, will you walk us through your framework for how generosity is actually inspired? Like, what are these steps that create these conditions that we're talking about?
So this is super simple. This is what I created that I wish had been around when I first got my start. Because what I'm going to share with you is very simple and it's in order. Um, Now, someone may come in at a different spot, but let me just share with you that the framework is called DREAMS, where every letter in the word DREAMS stands for a step in the process of inspiring generosity. So D is for discover, and we need to make sure that we're meeting with the right person, the person that has the capacity, that has a track record of being generous, who's genuinely interested in this and who has a relationship with us that we can build upon, but making sure we discover the right person in the first place. R is for research. How do we plan and prepare so that we, again, ultimately are inviting the right person at the right time? And planning and preparing means planning for the visits that we're going to have with them versus winging it. What are we not just going to, not just are we, what are we going to say, but like, what do we want to know? And what can we find out ahead of time? And what do we want to make sure we find out when we're with them? E is for engage. And engaging is about asking the right questions to reveal what they want to accomplish with their with their wealth. And E is also about how do we articulate not just what we do, but why it matters. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we inviting them? Why them? Why now? Why are you the right ones to work on this mission? In fundraising terminology, we call that the case for support. But engage is really about developing genuine, authentic relationships that are two-way. A is for activate. How do you take someone on the journey from awareness to involvement to investment? And then how do you invite people to make gifts, all kinds of gifts, including non-cash? Again, I use the word invite versus ask. And then M is multiply. How do you take your existing supporters and make it super easy for them to be a walking champion for your cause and to have them help you broaden the base of support? And then S is sustain. How do we show gratitude in personal ways? And how do we show the impact of how their gift has made a difference? Because if we show someone how their gift changed a life, and we've created those conditions and they've had an amazing giving experience, you know what they're going to say? What do you need next? What more can I do? So again, someone might come in at a different stage, but if you as a professional in this industry know those things, how to discover, how to research, how to engage, activate, multiply, and sustain, it's actually simple, it's beautiful, it's not difficult, it's really great for everyone involved.
All right, I love the dream strategy. Where my mind goes is instantly to engage. Because I'm
Mm,
like, great, but what do those questions look like? So if you're I'm gonna get really tactical for those type A folks that are like me. If you're listening to this and you're like, this is a beautiful strategy. I'm finally sitting down, I'm engaging and building a relationship with a donor, right? We've done the discovery, we've done the research, we're inviting them in. What are these questions that we talk about? And then how do you take that and then get it to like a stock gift
well,
or a, any kind of major gift?
yeah. So the first thing we have to do is commit to spending 80% of our time listening and asking great questions and not come in there armed with everything we want to say. So that's step one. And then we're
That's
trying,
I'm gonna call that out because that's a lot. Like we go in and we worry so much about what we're gonna say, but you just said 80% is listening. So it's like have a game plan and have a framework, but that framework is asking the right questions, then you're just listening. I love that. 80% is listening. All right, keep going. This is so good.
if it's a company, the kinds of questions I'm going to ask are, what keeps you up at night? I'm trying to find out what are they trying to accomplish? Because in
Mhm.
their case, it's marketing dollars more often than philanthropy, but it's like, what are you trying to accomplish? If it's sponsorships, what are the best sponsorships you've ever done and why? When do you make your decisions? What size sponsorships do you typically do? Do you make your decisions as a committee or do you do them as they come in or once a quarter? I mean, I just want to know, and I always ask permission. First of all, There's no surprises. So when I have this meeting, I'm setting it up. I'm going to let them know I'm not asking you for anything at this meeting. I just want to learn. I have so many questions I want to ask you so that when the time is right, I can be thoughtful.
Mm,
Now,
good too.
if I've already developed a relationship with them and it is time to invite them, I'm going to call them and be saying, "Hey, I would like to have a conversation about the possibility of you investing in this project. Can we talk?" Now, by the time I invite them, we have such a great relationship that it's going to be just, of course, natural next step.
Mhm.
But let's say it's not a company, let's say it's an individual. My goal is to find out what matters to them. There's three things they can do with their money. They can save it, they can give it, and they can spend it. They want to give it for a reason. Why?
Mm.
There's a book out there. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like the 7 different reasons why people give. Like there's categories of different ways. Some people give for out of a gratitude. They want to pay it forward. Someone else is giving because of legacy or it's part of their family tradition. And there's a lot of different reasons why people give. And so I want to also find out, do they make the giving decision themselves? Or should I be talking to their spouse or should the spouse be there? Do they typically make their decisions in November? Do they have a donor advised fund? What is the best giving experience they've ever had and why? When you ask those kinds of questions, they just share so much and they appreciate it. Sometimes I'm asking other unrelated questions, but they know I'm there to have a conversation around generosity. But I want to make sure that they know I'm not just concerned about what I can get from you. My conversation at first is just to figure out, are you really the right person I should be encouraging on this journey? Because I might discover halfway through that, you're more passionate about something else, and I would be better off introducing you to someone who works for that cause than trying to convince you. Because we're not trying to get people to do what they don't want to do. We're not trying to convince or pressure, right? We're trying to help people who already want to do this make it super easy and super enjoyable. So to me, developing a genuine, authentic relationship means I care about you. I know you want to hear from me. And when it is my time to share, again, I'm not going to just tell you all the things we do. And probably I'm only going to share what I think now you really care about. If I'm talking first, I don't really know you. Who knows what all I'm going to share? Probably going to overwhelm you with information. But if I've gotten to know you, I might be like, ooh, some of the things I was gonna share, I don't even need to share. They already know that. So it's going in open, going in, I don't know what's going to come from this conversation. I don't have this agenda to get something from you. That's an energy shift that you need to make. Um, and they love it. It's how, and you love it. It's so much more enjoyable and rewarding and sustainable. Yeah, that's just engaged.
Yeah, I love that. We got another question, and it said, what are some practical first steps for inspiring donors to consider non-cash gifts like appreciated stocks or real estate, especially for faith-based organizations that may be new to major gift fundraising?
Stocks and non-cash gifts is a method, okay? Just like like giving monthly is a method. So I don't think the inspiration's around how we give. It's around, um, I mean, you definitely want to give in a way that's going to be easy for them and allows them to make a big gift, but it's really not about the money and it's not really about the method as it is about how we can make this simple for you to make a transformational gift. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It
Inspiring is inspiring someone to make the gift and then, oh my gosh, you mean I can save on taxes and I can get a tax deduction and you can get more and I can do all of this and it's painless and you can do it because you're connected with infinite giving. So now we can do it like super easy. Oh my gosh, how beautiful is that? And then pair that with really genuine gratitude and showing the impact and you will be so different than the typical nonprofit that is asking people for money.
Yeah. And I think so much of that is in the listening and asking, not being afraid to engage in the types of giving. And that's where even, a lot of smaller organizations or faith-based organizations are engaging in discussing endowments. right? And that's where if you really want to pull that thread, it's the parable of the talents. Like, how are you stewarding these funds? How are you thinking about long-term, sustainability for your organization? What do these mean? I think way too often small to mid-sized nonprofit leaders or board members discount themselves from those types of gifts. Whereas higher ed, right? And Joanna served on there. I'm on a board of trustees at higher ed. And, we have endowments. That is the world higher ed lives in. But that doesn't mean it's not accessible also for smaller organizations, right? And so often it's the idea of, to me, asking those questions, because I've also been a fundraiser, is really like, have you ever thought about giving in this way? Do you think about legacy gifts and kind of, what you want your treasure to do, right? Especially, if they're going, they can't take their funds with them. So what is it, Joanna? You said, I love that. You're like, they can spend it, they can
They give it.
save it or give it, right? And so they're thinking about that way. And usually these folks are pretty savvy people, right? They're successful. So it's really just about engaging in different ways where would they ever be interested in a legacy gift? What would that legacy mean for them? And then getting into, I just as a newer organization, I want to let you know that we do have the ability to receive these gifts. So if it's helpful for you or you'd like to engage in conversations, just know that we want to help you give in the way that's most beneficial for you.
Karen, could I take another stab at answering that question? Because I just thought of something.
Sure.
I discounted it because I was like, well, it's just a method. But actually, when someone has business interests or they have stock or they have, a lot of times there's a story there. So inspiring someone to give from that means what's their story? What's the legacy there? Where did that money come from? So I do think that you can inspire those gifts by being inquisitive and figuring out, wow, this is such a meaningful way that they generated this revenue. Maybe there's a meaningful way they can give it that aligns with that. So again, it comes back to the stories, their stories.
It's their stories, and then you having the infrastructure and ability to receive and engage in those conversations with them. I know we're coming up on time, and I want to say one of the biggest challenges we hear is, well, where do I even start? Like, what do you say? And I know we've kind of touched on this, but let's make it really clear. Like, what would you say to a nonprofit leader or board member who wants to step into these conversations but feels overwhelmed or underprepared? Like, what is their best next step? And that's why we say when you get really overwhelmed, we don't have to go all the way to the end. Like, what is your next best step that you can do to engage? Joanna, what would you say their next best step would be?
Um, Give themselves some grace and recognize they're not alone.
Yeah.
It's not you. If it's awkward and uncomfortable, sometimes it's because we're in a system that's just not set up for this. We're not using terminology that would make it easier. So give yourself some grace and know you're not alone. And then the training is really important. And then partner with Infinite Giving, partner with someone who can make this easier and who can answer the questions that come up. So training, partnerships, and give yourself grace.
Absolutely. And hopefully this conversation is sparking really great ideas for everyone. I love the dreams kind of framework. We don't want to overcomplicate things, but at the same time, there's a lot of nuance to major gifts. And these donors really want to know, hey, does this organization have a really clear financial framework? Like, do they know what they're doing? Can they even handle a major gift? Because often they do understand those tax efficiencies, or as they learn, and then if they go to you and you don't have that infrastructure or any awareness, then they're probably going to still want the tax efficiencies and they still want to give because it's coming from a place of good intention and generosity. And they'll find an organization who does that infrastructure, who can receive those gifts. So just remember that we can help nonprofits set up brokerage accounts in just a few business days. We create stock gift workflows that is significantly better than download the PDF, have your guy call our guy, don't forget to call the office, and all of that kind of painful back and forth. We can help you steward those gifts really well. We don't charge any transaction fee on stock donations. Ultimately, we believe receiving generosity should be as joyful and easy as giving it. So make sure that you're partnering with somebody like us or somebody else who can make it really easy for you, who can give you the QR codes for the galas and the mailers and kind of work through that process. I know we're a little bit of time, but we do have a couple more questions that Joanna, if we can just dive into, and if you need to go on to your next thing, feel free, but we'll try to knock two of these out and then we'll let everyone get on to their next thing of the day. Um, but we did have, oh, do you need special systems to manage receipt of stock gifts? Yes, right? So ideally, you can find somebody like us where we're providing the advisory support, we're putting it on your website. We are capturing the pledge of the gift. We give you full transparency on so and so pledged it. Here's where they sent it. We receive it. We sell it, liquidate it. We deposit it into your preferred account. We send all of your donation receipts. Um, I'm biased. I would encourage you not to do it yourself, though. You're having so many conversations. You're doing all this. There are professionals that can do it. And if you have that really traditional, painful process, again, there are better ways to do that. So there is some infrastructure and certain tax requirements you need on those tax receipts. Um, I think the last one, I'm going to give it to you, Joanna, where it said, there's so much chatter about donor advised funds right now. And it's what, over $200 billion sitting in donor advised funds right now. Are there effective ways to market your organization to DAFs specifically? What would you say about that?
It's true. $250 billion is sitting in donor advised funds, meaning
Art for philanthropy, and they already got their tax deduction for it, and it's just not being deployed.
and when you ask the generous givers why, a lot of times they'll say, and I don't know if we're answering the question here, but a lot of times they'll say, well, when I go to I want to make a gift, but the last time I did, I got another request at the same time, or I never heard how my gift made a difference, or the person's not there anymore, and that's because the turnover is 14 months. So there's a lot of that money is stuck because we have a bottleneck of generosity. We have generous people who want to give, we have nonprofits who have all kinds of needs, but the money is stuck. And I believe it's a training issue as well. So I too want to just mention that if anyone would like some assistance with training, if they go to my website, inspire-generosity.com, if they want to take an assessment and learn, work with me to help them stop fundraising and start inspiring generosity instead, would love to have a conversation and allow that. But um, donor advised funds, back to the question, if you're familiar with how they work, talk about them. Ask people, do you have a donor advised fund? What do you use it for? Who do you give to? They're wonderful tools. But getting them to activate that money that's already sitting there just requires that a new approach and a new type of energy that you bring to the conversation.
Yes, ask for it. When in doubt, all of this,
Mhm.
build relationships, build authentic relationships, reframe it where you're inviting them into generosity, and then talk about the different pathways for that generosity to make its way to you. I think a lot of it with donor advised funds is it feels really complex. They just need to move the money from there to you, right? And so really trying to get it on your website, making it easy. Again, Infinite Giving also has a DAF widget. It's all included. We do stock, crypto, DAFs, endowment gifts, cash, stock giving, all of that. And I know we're at time, but just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us today. Joanna, thank you for your wisdom, your heart, and your mission. You have an upcoming retreat, is that right? That maybe
Yes.
has a spot or two that we could offer to folks?
Yes, it's on October 6th in Michigan. And if you go to my website, you can learn more about the retreats that I offer. They're Generosity Accelerator retreats. You can learn the method in 2.5 days instead of taking months. So it's a retreat, but it's also a Generosity Accelerator. So more information on the website, starts with an assessment. Be happy to talk to anyone who might be interested.
Great. Awesome. Well, I know this conversation reminded us that generosity isn't just about asking, but it's really also inviting people into something bigger than themselves. So to everyone listening, the generosity is already there. Your job is to be ready to receive it and have confidence to engage in some of those more complex conversations. Again, you don't have to be the expert, but you want infrastructure and knowledge. So, where you can invite them in and repeat, repeat. Remember 7 times next time you're Instagram scrolling. It's inviting those pathways. If you're ready to make a non-cash giving seamless and powerful part of your fundraising strategy, we'd love to talk to you at Infinite Giving. Again, we can get you up and going about 3 business days. We'd be honored to support your mission. But either way, whether we see you again or not, we hope you all have a wonderful and successful end of your giving season, and look forward to hearing more stories of how you all inspired generosity. Thank you so much.